Hey guys, my name is Taylor Ludwig and welcome to another episode of The Poor Man's Workshop. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I created my dust collection system. We're going to talk about everything from blast gates to piping and what to do to make sure you get the best suction from your dust collector. I'll also be covering a couple things that I learned not to do that reduce the productivity of my dust collector. Stick around because the video is coming up. For the past few years, dust collection, or rather the lack of dust collection, has been a really big problem in my shop. My workhorse tools really haven't had an efficient way for me to remove debris from them, so I'm super excited to have this set up with blast gates and all my machines hooked into one system. It's going to make my shop much more efficient and productive, not to mention much cleaner and safer for me to work in. My first step is to get all the horizontal piping set up and run across to the different tools in my shop. If you're familiar with the Poor Man's Workshop, it's in a 2-car garage like most non-commercial shops are, and space is at a premium, so being strategic with how I run the piping is very important. The first thing I did was use some blocks of wood and some hose hangers from Woodcraft to hang long lengths of 4-inch PVC on the bump down in the garage. I chose to use PVC because I felt like there were a lot more fitting options that were available at the big box store and ones that would help me to customize this system to how I needed it. I also felt like PVC was much easier to trim. It only takes a simple jigsaw or sawzall to make the cuts. But metal HVC ducting is a common choice as well. Whatever you decide to use, it's important to keep the diameter of the ducting as large as you can for the majority of your system. My jet dust collector opening is for a 4-inch fitting, so I use 4-inch ducting for pretty much all of it. By reducing the diameter, you are reducing the CFMs, which is essentially the volume of air that can be pulled through the piping, which in return reduces the amount of dust it can pull at once. Really only reduce the diameter of your piping when you have to. For instance, when you're hooking up flex hose to a tool that requires a smaller dust port. Now getting everything set up is as easy as measuring, cutting, and connecting each piece to where you want it. As you can see, I have one 90-degree fitting that will split off and run along the ceiling and then drop down right where my table saw is. I'm so excited to be able to have dust collection for my table saw. Finally, there's no more dust clouds. With all the horizontal piping installed, I can start working on the vertical drop downs. Now to make sure these fittings and piping are sealed tight, I found this PVC tape at Home Depot that works great. I'll include a link to it below with all other materials I used for this project. It's super durable and has a high PSI rating, so it'll hold up to any small leaks you might encounter. I added a 90-degree fitting and a shorter piece to drop down right on the side of where my table saw is. I then added a 2.5 by 4-inch Y fitting. The 4-inch side will continue to go down to my table saw, and the 2.5-inch side will connect to my downdraft table and my new outfeed assembly table. I later changed that back to a 4-inch by 4-inch fitting for the same reasons that I told you not to reduce the diameter of your piping. When it comes to any of your pipe fittings, especially the 90-degree fittings, you want to avoid any sharp turns. If you have too many sharp turns in your system, it will reduce your CFMs and the efficiency of your dust collector. Not to mention, dust could collect in those sharp corners and it would be a pain to have to pull it apart and find where the clog is. Hey, if you haven't had a chance, make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell below. There are going to be a lot of awesome projects coming to the Poor Man's Workshop this year. Now it's time to move the dust collector back in place and get this thing connected. The port on my dust collector is smaller than the opening on this 45-degree fitting I had got for it. So I use some weather seal tape to make it tight while still allowing me to pull it off if I need to access a clog or something. These twist-on fittings from Woodcraft work really great to connect PVC piping and flex hose. I attached the fitting to the dust collector and then added another twist-on fitting to the start of the system. Between these two twist-on fittings, I'll add some flex hose to give me a little bit of flexibility. I could run some PVC all the way down to the dust collector itself, but I want a little bit of flexibility to move the dust collector around if I need to. You want to limit your use of flex hose because the thinness of the hose wall will reduce the CFMs as well. You really should only use it where the system attaches to your tools. I use a little bit more than that. It's mainly because I ran out of PVC and had plenty of flex hose left. Sometimes you just have to work with what you got. The flex hose attaches to these fittings with some simple keyed hose clamps. There are some other wire hose clamps that I use later on that work much better and stay much tighter. I'll link them below. Here's a good look at my flip down workbench. This thing is made from a simple solid core door and some door hinges. It's seen so much use in the years past, but now it remains flipped down most of the time just to save on space, especially because I'm designing and building an awesome assembly table in the upcoming months. Above the workbench, I'll be installing 3 break-offs for my joiner and 2 other tools. I wasn't positive on exactly where I wanted these to go, so I used more flex hose so I can change the location if I need to. I also used different Y fittings because I had these laying around from a previous project, and they fit just fine going into the 4-inch PVC versus fitting around them like the other fitting. Just below each break-off, I installed blast gates. Blast gates are these awesome little gates that allow you to shut off the airflow to the tool it's hooked up to. That way you can concentrate all the CFMs on one tool, giving it the best suction and dust collection while in use. These blast gates I got from Woodcraft are great and work with the 4-inch flex hose I use. Blast gates really help with productivity as well. Instead of taking time to hook up your dust collector or shop back to each tool anytime you use it, you just open the gate on the tool you're using and shut all the other gates, and boom, you're ready to go. Then it was time to install the last few pieces of piping and flex hose. Now, while we have a minute, let's talk about grounding. Now, there's a thought that static electricity can build up in the system, causing a spark and ultimately starting the dust and the dust system on fire if you don't find a way to ground it. This is usually done by adding a copper wire throughout the piping that is grounded on one end. While this idea seems valid, I've yet to find an actual case where not grounding a system led to a static fire, which leads me to ask if this is one of those tall tales in the woodworking world, or if there are actually cases of it happening. I chose not to add any grounding to my system for right now, but I probably will go back and add a grounding wire later on, if not just to put my mind at ease about it. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you think I'm crazy for not adding a grounding wire, or if you're with me in thinking it's just one of those rumors that gets passed around. On some of the Y fittings, I had to add a spacer because the blast gates only fit inside the 4-inch inside diameter of piping, not the larger fitting. Then I attached the blast gates to those and screwed them to the wall. On the bottom side of my table saw, I added a board that the blast gate would screw onto. This added some stability to the connection of the blast gate and the drop down for the table saw connection. Once all the blast gates were connected, I could finally get each tool connected. The flex hose slides right onto the blast gate opening, and then the wire hose clamp tightens around it. And the same with the other side, as long as the tool has a 4-inch dust port. If not, you'll have to get a smaller hose or a larger adjustment fitting. Then I did the same thing with my joiner. I connected the flex hose to the blast gate and then connected it to my joiner. The flex hose is nice because it will allow me to move the tools slightly if I need to. The position of my tools seem to always be changing in this small shop. On the other wall, I'll be adding a Dust-Rite quick change port fitting from Rockler because I'll be needing to switch between two different tools. My miter saw and planer flip-top tool stand will be on this wall and needs a way to switch between the two quickly and easily. As you probably saw, there was a section of piping that was incomplete. This is because I ran out of PVC piping. Now, I could run back to the big box store and buy a whole other piece of PVC for only a few feet that I need, or I could just use flex hose that I have plenty of. I decided to do the latter. I'm not even sure what I'm going to attach to this blast gate, maybe a floor sweep, but I'm not concerned about this extra amount of flex hose. It will work for right now. And that is the complete setup of my dust collection system for right now. I'm sure I'll be adding a bit to it later on, but for right now, it works great. It runs to both walls of my garage and has a drop down right where my table saw is. I'm super excited to be able to collect dust efficiently in my shop and not have to sweep as much of it into a dustpan. Oh, and no more dust boogers is always a plus. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a lot. If there's something that you feel I could improve on my dust collection, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment below. And if you haven't had an opportunity, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell below so you'll be notified anytime I have a new video that goes up on YouTube. Again, thanks for watching, and like I always say, never stop creating.